This is the familiar emblem of Ford cars. And now take a look at the first logo of the Soviet GAZ. Are they similar by chance? Of course not. The factory in Nizhny Novgorod was built by, attention, Americans during Stalin's time. And look at another pride of Stalin's industrialization, the famous Magnitka. The master plan of the metallurgical plant in Magnitogorsk was originally copied from a similar American factory in the state of Indiana. The power station was built by Germans and the equipment was supplied by the British. And what will the globally renowned American company General Electric do for the electrification of the USSR? Simply install their turbines at the DneproGES. Why? At a time when the country is isolating itself from the rest of the world and intends to build and produce everything itself, the key factories and future pride industrial giants were designed and built by the hated world bourgeoisie. The economy of the USSR wasn't as independent as it seemed. It's the year 1929. Americans are ahead of the whole planet. The economy is booming. Cities and skyscrapers are growing. People are enjoying life. It's like something out of the Great Gatsby.
The buildings were higher. Parties were bigger.
And then a global economic crisis hits, the Great Depression. There is an overproduction crisis. Stock prices are inflated. And then all companies crash and burn, factories shut down, construction stops everywhere, and millions of Americans are left without jobs and even without food. But then there is the Soviet Union. And according to the plan, there is a great feat of industrialization needed. But there is a lack of materials, technologies, and experience to build the factories, all of which are available in the West. And over there, workers and engineers are desperate for work and money. Remember, they are in the midst of the Great Depression, so Russia, even though it's Soviet and not recognized by official American diplomacy, is a land of opportunities. Just to give you an idea, Americans only acknowledge the existence of the Soviet Union and establish diplomatic relations with Moscow in 1933, when GAZ, Magnitka and DneproGES are already up and running. Meanwhile, 2,000 firms and 20,000 foreign engineers and workers come to build socialism. Stalin himself later tells that American ambassador Harriman that 2/3 of all major Soviet enterprises were, so to speak, created with the assistance of Americans. And among them, of course, was Henry Ford's company. So he was the first in the world to introduce assembly line production of automobiles, and the Soviet Union just happened to need both cars and assembly lines. So there was a great interest in Ford, and for Ford, the interest was purely monetary. Back in 1925, he sold 12,000 branded tractors to the Soviet Union along with a license. As a result, workers at the Krasny Putilovets plant in Leningrad assembled Fordson Putilovets tractors, so based on this license. Overall, it's not surprising that an American capitalist in the spring of 29, even before the Great Depression, entered into a profitable contract that wouldn't hinder him during the crisis. Indeed, it's unclear what benefit the world gets from Ford building the Gorky automobile plant, but Ford certainly benefits. The USSR will purchase parts from the Americans for $30 million, while Ford himself will lose $60 million a year on his American production during the crisis. So, it's not surprising that the plant in Nizhny Novgorod was built in just 18 months, and the assembly line, following the American model, was launched on January 1st, 1932. At the same time, Nizhny was renamed to Gorky, resulting in the name GAZ, Gorky Automobile Plant. By 1935, the Ford-Soviet Union collaboration came to an end, but the USSR continued to draw inspiration from American Ford production. So look, here is the iconic Soviet car, the Volga GAZ-21, and here is the famous Ford mainline. Of course, in the USSR they deny accusation of plagiarism and argue that the Volga resembles a Ford no more than any other good car of that era. Although it's also known that the Gorky Automobile Plant purchased Ford mainline and other foreign cars of that time for study. But plagiarism is not easy to prove, and nobody prohibits drawing in inspiration. Now, let me introduce you to this man, Albert Kahn. In America, he's known as the architect of Detroit, the city of motors, because he designed the headquarters of General Motors, the Detroit Police Building, and overall builds plans for the Big Three of Detroit: Chrysler, General Motors, and Ford. But you know who will earn the most money? The USSR. He'll be led there by almost a complete absence of contracts and the threat of bankruptcy. Again, you can be as good an American architect as you want, but when the country is starving, it's not in the mood for major construction. Kahn and his team will design over 500 factories during industrialization. Among his creations is the famous Stalingrad tractor plant. Kahn initially builds it in the USA, but then dismantles it, loads it onto 100 transport ships, and ships it to the Soviet Union, where it's reassembled in just 6 months. Of course, several years of such productive construction bring Kahn good money, and the Soviet Union pays around $2 billion for his services. So today that's almost 250 billion. And here is the question: why do we hear so little about the man who essentially designed the industrialization of the USSR? Well, let's be honest. Because it's commonly believed that the enthusiasm of the Soviet people prevailed over capitalist engineering experience. So agree with such a narrative, a large number of foreigners on a socialist construction site would spoil the picture. The Great Patriotic War. The country and naturally the entire industry lives by the slogan "all for the front, all for victory." According to statistics, every third shell and every second tank of the Soviet Union are made from Magnitogorsk metal. That is, from the very plant that 10 years earlier was designed by the American company R2G McKee & Co. from Cleveland. The layout of the enterprise will be an enlarged copy of this plant of the US Steel Corporation in Indiana. So, for the construction in Magnitogorsk, 800 foreign specialists will arrive. Of course, Soviet engineers quickly learn with foreign assistance. And builders from all over the country, driven by enthusiasm or something else, break all conceivable records for construction speed. So the Americans themselves simply don't believe that Magnitka can be built in just a couple of years. You want to rush in all directions. You are moving too fast. The world's largest steel mill, our American Gearworks, took 12 years and a half years to build. Add another 11 years for its design, and you hope to start the plant in 3 years. In the end, by the way, the American predictions won't come true even once. Magnitka will actually be built and launched in just 3 years. But in reality, there would be no industrialization without mutually beneficial cooperation. So when it's just business, nothing personal, that's good. And yes, whether now or then, no economy in the world is capable of producing everything alone. You either need to buy something from someone or sell what you produce to someone else. Everything else is convenient myths created by propaganda, and then children are raised on them. Fair competition never makes anyone worse off. Collaboration with others provides the opportunity to improve one's own, while isolation and self-isolation will only lead to stagnation and self-destruction. So work for yourself and for your tomorrow.